Secularists would like you to believe that there is no involvement of religion in the founding of our country. Really? Why is it involved in so many of their documents and so many of the ideas that formed freedom as we know it? We'll look at that. I'm John Leoffler, and the program is Steel on Steel.
Steel on Steel. News, commentary, interview, and debate. An alternative information source for politics, religion, and global events. Now, here's the host of Steel on Steel, John Leoffler.
So, welcome to Steel on Steel. We are a weekly program dedicated to the sharpening of ideas, news, commentary, interview, information, and debate, much of which you will not hear elsewhere. Our goal and pledge has been to be an early warning service, to connect the dots, especially projecting the trends, to stay ahead of the herd, and to cover those news stories that the mainline media have been ignoring by ignorance, bias, or neglect.
Yes, indeedy, that is the voice of the one, although apparently not the only John Leoffler. I was online recently looking him up and found a few other John Leoflers. Be that as it may, I can guarantee that there is no John Leoffler like this John Leoffler. He is a career broadcaster of 55 years in the industry, most of which was engaged in news and talk radio. For 33 years, he was heard on stations around the country on the syndicated network news program called Steel on Steel. He has been a talk show host on stations such as News Radio 85 KOA in Denver, an assistant editor producer at KCBS News Radio 74 in San Francisco, as well as several regional talk networks. For 18 years, he was also the co-host of the weekly Financial Sense News Hour with Jim Poplava. His motto is, quote, always the truth, unquote. And he maintains that's the one thing legacy media hasn't been doing for the last 3 or 4 decades, telling us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He is also famous for stating in his Steel on Steel program's intro,
your failure to be informed does not make me a wacko.
Please help me to welcome my dear friend, the John Leoffler. John, I just want to say, first of all, it is a great privilege to have you on this program. You are a national treasure. I know you don't like me saying that, but man, I'm telling you, this is the way I feel about you. We go back quite a few years now. I remember years ago, you did a program. You started, well, you've been in media for over 40 years, but you did a program called Steel on Steel, and you've been doing that you did that for about 30 years or so, a little bit more than that, I think probably. And that program, it was such an icon of an attempt to do accurate reporting. And I never forgot that because I used to frequently watch it, and I would compare it with other news media and other news programs that were discussing the same topics, and I could see how far ahead you were and how accurate you were, and that's what made me love your program so much. And so I'm not saying there weren't other programs out there somewhere that was as dedicated to truth as you were, but I recognized with you, and that's why I stuck with you for so long. I got some ancient cassettes of your Steel on Steel program in my archives and stuff, and I'm trying to convert those over into the digital now. But I just want to say that you are the man, and you have been such a blessing to me, and I just love having an opportunity to have you on my program to talk about the things that you talk about best. That program would deal with economics, with politics, and with religion, but you did it from a Christian worldview. And I'm not talking about just any old so-called Christian worldview, but you did it you tried to do it from an accurate Christian worldview, what made it so valuable. So as a result of that, I became very well informed. I became a very informed viewer, and I learned how to be a very careful evaluator, because I learned from you and others like you why it was so important not to just hear something and then accept it and repeat it, but to hear it and evaluate it carefully to determine how accurate it was, so that when you repeated it, you wouldn't have to worry about misinforming anybody. So that's what you taught me, and I'm telling you, man, I have never been more grateful to God about something in my life, because had I not watched your program, I would have never known how to deal with media, and I would have never been as well informed as I am now about things that's going on in our world. So I want to say thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome for that. I don't think I can live up to the accolades here, so let's just end the show. I can't live up to that.
Tell us a little about yourself. I know for some of my viewers that don't know you, that don't have that knowledge of your past, just give us a little brief introduction about yourself.
Well, into radio and TV news in 1966, 67, right around there, and pretty soon had an assistant editor for CBS News in San Francisco. In 1990, my wife, we met working for a television network. And so our backgrounds are similar. And she finally told me, she says, you've been off the air for a couple of years. You need to get on the air and tell people what's really happening. And that's what I've always had a passion for, is truth, because the whole nature of the spiritual battle today is deception. And the question I always taught my listeners to is it true? It's not a question of is it a conspiracy theory? What do the authorities believe? Blah, blah, blah. Always ask the question, what's true? What's going on here? And that's what drove the show for 33 years. We started in 1990 and I finally retired a couple of years. First of all, I was so disgusted with my colleagues in the media after having worked with mainline groups for about 20 years before we started our own show, was the fact they had stopped being reporters of news and they had started becoming purveyors of narratives. And they would determine what their narrative was. It was usually a hardcore leftist narrative, really neo-Marxist is what I call it, which sees everything through the eyes of oppressors and oppressed, and everything is squashed into that Marxist dialectical narrative, because that's what it is. It's a Marxist narrative. And if the object in question supported the narrative, man, they would just pound it to death 24/7. You would just hear it. Bum, bada, bum, bada, bum. The drum beat was there. If it could sort of be made to fit the narrative, they would twist it, drag it over to the narrative, and then pound it. And if it didn't fit, they would spike it, they would ridicule it, they would call it conspiracy theory. And I should say right at the start, I need some new conspiracy theories, because all of those things that they told me were conspiracy theories before when I would speak, well, they've all come true. So I need some new conspiracy theories.
Absolutely.
So that's what people need to be aware of, is your media. I keep telling even extended members of my family, you need to understand they are lying to you.
Thank you.
Okay. They are purveying a narrative to support an outcome that they want. And you see this in the Middle East. You see it in almost everything. And it's amazing how often we have been caught, or they have been caught in just outright lies and distortions, and they don't miss a beat, Denzel. They don't miss a beat. They just move right on to the next one,
Absolutely. Wow.
We went through 26 months of Russia collusion,
Yep.
and it turned out to be a big fat lie, something they had just contrived. They were even quoting sources, unlike what happened with Woodward and Bernstein in the 70s with Watergate. At least the Washington Post then, I call it the Whopper now, instead of the Washington Post, they at least strove for credibility. They never ran with the story till they were able to document it.
That's
even if Deep Throat was giving them information to show them where to go and look, they never ran with anything that he gave them. Never.
Right.
Today, all we heard during Russia collusion was unnamed sources say somebody's brother's cousin who knows somebody in the janitorial closet at the White House says, and I go, I can't believe you're running with this stuff. We were told that the Covington High School men on the Washington Mall were, anti-Native American racists. And it turns out they were actually defending the Native Americans who were there. And you could see it. All you had to do was watch the video.
The whole video, that's right.
They would not mark it back. They told us there was nothing to be seen in the Hunter Biden laptop. Remember that? 4 years of bam, there it is. We were told that there were no agents provocateurs in the crowd on January 6th, and it turns out there were over 26?
26. That's right.
26 federal agents that were there.
Right.
Another lie that they told us. Lie after lie after lie.
And 13 was inside. Actually went inside in violation.
In violation of it. And the question is, were they actually there just to observe, or were they to be provocateurs? And in some cases, we know they were provocateurs.
Yes.
Okay. And so this whole thing was a setup. The other reason it's a setup, Denzel, is because whether you're watching ABC, CBS, the Communist News Network that's known as CNN, or MSLSD, okay,
I like that.
the talking points are all the same. The language is all the same. Now, there is no statistical justification for that. They have to be talking to each other and coordinating what they're saying. So this is a massive effort. And that's why they're upset at you and
Yes.
me and
Yeah.
anybody who's doing podcasts or alternate newscasts, because
Yes.
what's happened is we have end run the gatekeepers, and they were sitting there for 30 years that I was on the air saying, "Oh, we're professionals, yes, and these little people over here, oh, they're not professional." And I would chafe at that. I go to me, "What do you mean I'm not a professional? I've been doing this for 30 years, you know. I mean, give me a break." Um, and so that's why they're upset. And that's why they're talking about censorship. And
Yes.
you hear it from former
Yes.
Secretary of State John Kerry and others.
Yes.
We have to save democracy by censoring this misinformation. And now
Wow.
misinformation means information they don't want you to hear. And
Wow.
if they really want to stop misinformation, then all the politicians should just shut up. That'll get rid of about 80%.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
It's I've grown so disgusted with our own media, but that's why
Wow.
you do what you do, right?
Yes, amen, amen.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what again what makes you such a valuable commodity in these day and times. They did the same thing with the COVID thing, which that was the first thing that really blew up to me and made it so obvious that they really didn't care nothing about truth. They just cared about their own bottom line, their own narrative, and they didn't care how many people they killed. They didn't care about how many people were harmed by it. They just said you either going to get on board what we're saying or you're going to be ostracized. And I thought that was
Right.
horrible. Now it's
They
coming out
will.
years later.
And yeah, I mean, if you remember, they told us that if we got the shot, it would keep us from getting it. It
Yep.
didn't. They told us it would keep us from spreading it. It didn't.
It
They told me to go, well, how
didn't
many?
spread in your body. It did.
Right, they didn't. They said, well, no, it's not. They called it a vaccine. It wasn't. It
It
was an
wasn't.
mRNA recombinant type of thing. It's just like I can't
Wow.
believe all of this. How much we were told
Yes.
that was fake, and then they're wondering now why over 50% of the country doesn't trust them
Doesn't
anymore.
trust it.
That's why CNN's ratings are in the toilet.
And MSNBC and ABC,
Yeah.
yes, they're all going down. Say, well, in fact, I heard they start trying to sell MSNBC and CNN.
Yeah, with that, yeah, yeah. I would really laugh. Every once in a while, you have a little sense of humor in the whole thing. If Elon Musk bought MSNBC,
Yeah, I would laugh.
I-
Yeah, yeah, like he did Twitter, right? That's right. Listen, and listen. Think about this. Another thing that bothers me about that whole situation is that nobody's going to jail for it, and
well,
that
not
only
only that,
encourages it.
right? Do you remember was it an FBI agent that perjured himself to the FISA court to get a warrant to spy on the Trump first
Yes,
campaign?
yes,
He perjured himself. We know
yes.
now he
It's
perjured.
documented, right?
We know that the justification to the FISA court was manufactured.
Yep.
Where are
Wow.
the prosecutions and the sentencing? Like, look at the people that are January 6th.
Yes,
Constitution says we have a right to speedy trial.
that's
They're
right.
still sitting in the cooler, so to
Wow.
speak, and they
Wow.
have yet to have trials. The whole thing is garbage. Where are all the people that on the 60 days of Black Lives Matter rioting that we
Right.
had in the country? Destruction of millions of dollars of federal property, over 50 people dead. Where are the prosecutions?
Wow.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You have to look at, I mean, even in your city of New York City,
Yeah.
how dingy the prosecutor is
Wow.
and what they're doing, and using law instead of prosecuting criminals, but to go after their political opponents.
Absolutely, man. The hypocrisy is astounding. It's just
It's
astounding.
overflowing.
Yeah.
But the people who only watch CNN or only watch ABC, they don't know that.
They have no clue. That's
They
a
have no
fact.
clue.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Now, whenever I talk with you, John, I'm like a kid in a candy store, and I could just do all kind of topics, and I can get really lost. But I'm gonna try to behave myself today. I'm gonna try to behave myself, and I'm trying to stay focused. We're going to talk about Israel and what we call Palestine, and that whole conflict there. It's a topic that's in the news quite often, and I want to talk to you about why understanding it correctly is so important, especially for Christians, but also for the public. And you just recently did a series called The Stone of Stumbling, and you did it on the Candlelight Christian Fellowship with
Right.
Dr. John Jason Murray. I thought that was a fantastic series. I mean, I think I counted like 7 episodes. It may have been more. I'm not sure. It was about 6 or 7 episodes. It was quite a few of them, and you guys covered a lot of ground. I mean, you just you almost left no stone unturned. And I mean, that was such a brilliant presentation to help anyone who really wanted to understand what was going on over there and why so many people are misinformed about it. You did a great job with that. I'm going to leave a link at the bottom of our context so that contact comments so that you can actually anyone who wants to see that series can watch it. But I want to ask you about that series. Why is it so important for Christians to not again Christians mainly, but why is it so important for everybody to understand this topic correctly?
And once again, by the way, the media and academia are distorting it.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
is this is the key. Everything you've heard about Gaza from the media, a lot of it's wrong. Latest report that came out showed that Hamas, I know you're not going to believe this, but Hamas has been inflating the casualty figures coming out of Gaza
Yes.
in order to make the Israelis look bad.
Yeah.
The biggest issue, do you want it politically or religiously? Take your
Both.
pick.
Both. I want
Okay.
both of them.
Well, politically, when the majority of your energy comes from the Middle East. When the West energy comes from there, automatically we're involved. I hate to inform people that are libertarian, but it's nice to be isolationist. And ordinarily, I'd say that's probably a pretty good idea. But when your energy comes from there and you're not energy independent,
Right.
and the Greens have done their best to see that we are not energy independent in the name of fighting global warming, which is another absurdity, the way that they're doing it. I'm not going to get into whether there's global warming or not, but
Right.
the gorilla in the room there's one big gorilla in the room, and that is we have no alternative energies to
That's right.
substitute for them. So they want to shut down the use of fossil fuels, which runs the entire global economy
Yep.
with no alternatives. Wind and solar are only backups, 10, 15% of the power grid. What else are you going to run planes, trains, automobiles on? They have no answer whatsoever. So
Yeah.
they might as well just shut up until the technology comes along that lets us do it. But the
Amen.
idea, when President Biden came in and he immediately just reversed everything Donald Trump has done,
Yep.
shut down the Keystone Pipeline project, despite the fact these companies had jumped through hoops for 10 years and spent millions of dollars doing it. That shot the price of fuel up. Images overnight just went right up and never really came back. But in third world countries, there were riots because that takes the third world countries, if we catch a cold, they catch the flu. And they are pushed, poor families are pushed below subsistence levels with those little things that I call environmentalism a white middle class man's sport, that we
Yes.
can talk about doing this and taking care of Bambi. And I'm in favor of good environmentalism, etc.
Yes, me
But
too.
good environmentalism rests on sound science, not politically biased science, and sound economics. If you don't maintain that, it won't do it. That's just one example of where the talking points have taken us so far
Right.
away from the realm of reality that you have people with their knees knocking, school kids. The planet's going to burn up before we're adults. We don't want to get married or have kids because
Mm.
it's a terrible world. I go, they've got this people. Did you see the article this morning on Drudge that the LGBT community is just been whipped up into a lather, and all you have to do is go read The Advocate or out.com.
Yeah.
They've been whipped up into a lather about the horrible things the Trump administration is
Yeah.
going to do. He's going to abolish
Mostly
gay
all
marriage.
lies.
All of that. They've got them so whipped up into a lather, they're
Yes.
scared. They're actually scared.
Yes.
And I don't point my finger at the LGBT community.
Right.
I pointed at their media. And I
Yes.
go, you guys are doing it.
Yes.
And you know you're doing
Know
it.
they're
And
doing
you
it.
know
That's right.
why you're doing it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and that's where we need to say. But the Middle East, to get back to your main question, is we're involved. And there's an ideological war going on that affects the United States and the West, even if the Europeans don't want to admit it to themselves.
Right.
And that is the effort of Islam to spread once again through jihad. I'm sorry. And I don't hate Muslims. I don't begrudge those who live peacefully. But let's face what's going on here.
Right.
All you have to do is listen to the voices of the jihadis, of even al-Jolani, the new leader in Syria, when he says, well, first we go to Damascus, then we're going to go to Jerusalem and get rid of the Jews. Hello, did you hear that? He's telling you what they're doing. In Europe, it's very clear. They want to make it a caliphate. They want to take over Europe, push out the Christians, etc. But in Europe, they're actually penalizing, they're prosecuting people who were saying that, even as they very immediately have desperate problems with this clash of civilizations going on in Europe, that their left-wing leaders are going around going, no, 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 we can't talk about it, you know. We have hit an insane day, Denzel. I
Yes,
never
we
thought
have.
we'd see this in
Yeah,
the 55 years I've been doing radio and TV. I never thought I would see this.
yeah,
So that's why it's important, is because you need to understand what's happening there. The Bible, from a religious perspective, we did a whole episode on this, on the Islamic eschatological expectations for Jerusalem. You know,
wow,
the Christians have their own
yeah,
eschatology about the end times in Jerusalem and the return of the Messiah,
right.
etc. So do the Jews. Well, the Muslims do too. And here's a hint, it doesn't include the Jews, you know. And so right then and there, you have an ideological divide that I don't care which Western powers come in and say, we're going to do this peace plan and it's going to do this, when I'm just shaking my head going, you know, you just don't know what you're talking about.
Mm,
But a lot of the narrative, look at what happened on October 7th.
yes.
And that's right next to my birthday. It seems like bad things happened to
Yeah.
Israel on my birthday, you know, because that was the Yom Kippur War. I
Yeah.
called October 7th Yom Kippur 2.
Yeah.
Um, and we had this horrible, gruesome attack on, well, first of all, on the rock concert that was going on, the
Right.
Nova concert, as well as the kibbutzim that were existing in the southern part of Israel.
Right.
Um, Almost immediately the next day, the protests against Israel were
Yep.
started.
Yep.
Israel hadn't even done anything. Okay. It was so gruesome. And I said to my wife, because we know how these media people think, they
Yes.
want to establish a moral equivalence
Wow.
between the Palestinians and Israel right now. And I
Yes.
said, they can't let this stand.
Nope.
They've got to do something to flip
Yep.
the narrative and divert the attention back to the poor Palestinians and away from Israel, because according to the Marxist narrative, Israel is the oppressor and the
Right.
Palestinians are the oppressed.
Right.
And I'll be the first one to admit, any country that has to occupy a territory and govern a people that doesn't want to be governed, that's a rough job.
Yes, it
And
is.
there's going to be abuses and violations. But the Palestinians have had over 5 chances to have a state.
That's
If they
right.
had wanted a state,
That's
they
right.
could have had it. You know, when these people were all running around with these signs going, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. And I go, but wait a minute, you know, time out. Gaza was free.
Yes.
The Israelis pulled out of Gaza in 2005, shalom, we'll see you
Yeah.
later. Okay. Now, did they turn Gaza into a jewel of the Middle East? They could have made it a tourist mecca. They could
Thank
have
you.
begun bringing in millions of dollars in money and made Gaza very prosperous. No, they poured all of that money, much of which came through Iran, much of which was paid by the Obama administration's bribe money to the
Yep.
Iranians.
Yep.
Okay, that came through there, and they turned it into a launching platform for rocket and missile attacks and physical attacks into Israel.
Yes.
Gaza was free for almost 2 decades,
Yep.
and we saw what they did to it.
Yep.
Okay,
Wow.
so land for peace, the whole political left in Israel for decades said, let's do it. That's what all the peace process was about with Yasser Arafat. But Arafat, 2000 in August, and if you listen to the show, I was telling my listeners, you got to understand,
Yep.
for the whole 1990s, everybody's making kissy kissy.
Yep.
They all want to see what they can get out of this thing. They don't have war. They don't have peace. It's just sort of a period of no war. There was investment flowing into the West Bank. People believed that peace was at hand. The society was going to prosper. There was investment. And I said, you got to understand, gang, when the big issues get thrown on the table, this whole thing's going to blow apart. And that's what happened in August of 2000, when you had to look at the fate of Jerusalem. Remember that who's going to possess Jerusalem, final borders, and right of return of refugees. And so when you put those issues on the table, it will fall apart. Yasser Arafat walked away from the table and went home and started the second intifada, all the attacks, the bombings of buses in Israel, and everything that went on. Supposedly a spontaneous eruption of thing, and it wasn't. We know from later data it was very well coordinated. But the media maintained that. President Obama went to talked to the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, the granddaddy of all terrorist organizations, founded in the early 1920s. And he went to speak at Al-Azhar University, and he telegraphed to the Middle East the U.S. was not going to keep Israel on the status that it was, and our relationship with the Islamic countries was going to be different. Boom! Overnight, practically, the Arab Spring is what the media were calling it. CNN was calling it that, even though one of their female reporters was raped in Tahrir Square while reporting on this whole thing. And almost all of that had to be put down violently by their governments. And some of it, like in Libya, is ongoing today, including the move towards Syria. And the Biden administration has done the very same thing, because the whole psyche of the Middle East is so different than what the Western politically correct narrative is. It's stunning.
Yes.
And we keep trying to impose our Western narratives down on a totally different situation, and it doesn't work. It's not working in Europe right now. You know, their social policies about unlimited immigration, clashing two cultures. You have a Christian-based secularized culture and an incoming culture of Muslims who do not have a tradition of freedom and democracy and things that we expect in the West. And they slammed these two cultures together and then didn't expect problems. Oh my gosh. I mean, how do I keep saying this? So that's why we had October 7th, because they perceived President Biden as being weak. Oh, and by the way, one of the other lies that we were told by the media consistently was that President Biden was mentally competent. And we knew 3 years ago he was deteriorating. I don't wish him ill because of that, but he had no business being in the job that he was in. You know, so that's another lie that the media told us.
Amen. So now you just articulated an amazing clarity about what's actually going on. But that's, as you said, that's not what we're getting from the media. And the media, and I'm not just talking about legacy media. I'm talking about even people who are Christians, who watch the legacy media or who tap the wrong sources. There's a sister, her name is Candace Owens. We're going to talk about her in a little while. Brianna Joy Gray, who used to be on the Rising, the Hill, staunch leftist, believes in Palestine, seems to hate Israel. This Finkelstein guy. There's a lot of them out there who, even when you present well, first of all, they never address the things you just articulated. They don't discuss those things. And then if someone like you was to bring it up, they would actually respond as if you didn't even bring the argument up. So there seems to be an intentional willingness or determination to ignore any fault on the part of Palestine, and only condemn Israel for everything.
Right.
And they seem to think
that's what the UN is doing. The UN just condemns Israel. Okay. We've had over 4,000 between 2000. We used to maintain a site called Praying for Persecuted Christians until Facebook threw us off, and because we were telling the truth again. And there were over 4,000 African-American, well, not African-Americans, Africans, they're black, Nigerians who have been murdered. That was just 2022 to 23.
Wow.
Over 30,000. This is a concerted genocidal effort by the Boko Haram terrorists, by at least one other terrorist group, along with the Fulani Muslim tribesmen who are consistently attacking Christian villages, murdering them in the middle of the night, burning their churches, burning their people, kidnapping their women. It's been ongoing. The media have chosen to largely ignore it. And when it does come out, they call it ethnic conflict.
Right.
And I mean, even the Catholic Archbishop of Nigeria just blew a cork when they began to, excuse me for a second, let me just kill that.
Sure.
Hold on a second. Sorry about that. I have this weird thing going on here.
That's quite all right.
Go away. Thank you. Robocalls. I had all the other lines muted. So anyway, over 4,000 were killed in just that 1 year, and the media calls it ethnic conflict. There's no ethnic conflict going on here. It's Muslims in the name of Allah killing Christians, period. End of story. Over 30,000 in the last 10 years. And the UN, silent, okay? But they can condemn Israel over and over and over again. Assad can butcher thousands of his own people. Where's the United Nations? Oh well. Show me one good resolution against the Assad regime that the
Mhm.
UN passed or took steps to deal with it.
Wow,
The hypocrisy is stunning,
it's
you
astounding.
know,
Wow.
and that's why the what I call the alternative media, then I call them the new media, have come in. We're doing the jobs that the old guys used to do.
Amen. Wow.
So,
Let me ask you a question. So now, anyone that addresses this and points out the hypocrisy are automatically viewed as Zionists, just Israeli supporting cults. You're not making any sense, and it's very clearly, as you just pointed out, that there is justifiable reason to stand with Israel against the horrible misrepresentation that they're suffering under, and the imbalance of observations. There's only the goal seems to be to make them demons and make them wrong no matter what, and to vilify,
right.
or rather to victimize the Palestinians as the victims no matter what, and that's horrible. So my question to you is that how do we balance this anti-Semitic game that's being played? Is there a clear First of all, is there a clear identifiable line between actual anti-Semitism and just criticism of a Jewish person or a Jewish group or Israel when they do something wrong or bad? Is there a line that can be drawn to be able to balance that so that we're not on the wrong side of either of these issues?
Um, there is a line. Okay.
Okay.
There is a difference between, say, for example, criticism of Israel's policies as a country or its actions
Right.
versus anti-Semitism as a whole, which is hatred of Jews just because they're Jews. I mean,
Right.
that's the easiest
Right.
definition.
Right.
And by the way, in the Islamic world, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion still
Right.
continues to circulate in Arabic today. See, you don't know this stuff unless you read the Arabic language press.
Right. Right.
There is a line. However, after I'm trying to be very precise about this.
Good.
After October 7th, it became very, very, very clear that the anti-Semites were hiding underneath that cover.
Yes.
And they came roaring out. They just came roaring out and showed themselves for what they really are. And so that line is so blurred now, you
Yes.
can't hide behind it.
Amen.
You have to remember, I know we were going to talk about the USS Liberty and Candace Owens.
Yes.
You have to remember that when incidents like that happened, say, for example, that was 57 years ago.
That's right.
It was
Right.
June 8th, 2000. I'm sorry, 1967, June 8th,
Right.
my mother's
Right.
birthday. It's always on a Leoffler family birthday that something happens. Um, and they were about 20 years out from the Holocaust. Their idea of never again was fresh in their minds.
Right.
The Russians were very much involved with the Egyptians and President Nasser of Egypt. There were big things at stake that don't exist today. This is 57 years later,
Wow. Yeah.
and they're still bringing that up as an issue. So I think I lost the track of the question that you asked, but my point being,
Mhm.
the situation is far more complicated, far more different than our Western media narratives. And you're right.
Right.
Israel's the bad guy. Israel can do no right. The
Right.
Palestinians can do no wrong.
Right.
And why? Well, because the Israelis are occupiers. That's what
Mm.
we're told.
Right. Amen.
But
Mm.
see, again, it's not that they say, well, this was Palestinian land. And then they came in. Well, first of all, nobody was using the term
Thank you.
Palestinian as a people until 1967.
That's right.
But what actually happened is the land was owned by the Turks until they lost it to the British in 1917
That's
as a
right.
result of the Turks backing the wrong side in World War One.
And
That's what,
never were called occupiers at that time.
and they were not called occupiers at that time. When Jordan had the property prior to 67,
Yeah.
they were not called
Not called occupiers.
occupiers.
Yeah.
Okay, only when Israel came in were
Yes.
they called occupiers.
Yes.
Were there Arabs living there? Yes. Were the Arabs promised their own state by the British and the French? Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Even though the British and the French in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which you just saw collapse over
Yeah.
100 years later
Yeah.
with the Syrian civil war going on here, Sykes-Picot is all over. It's gone. Okay.
Mm.
They knew that they were not going to give the Arabs that state in particular that they wanted. Originally, it was supposed to be Transjordan was supposed to have all of the West Bank and the East Bank, as well as Transjordan is what it was called. So the Arabs were disappointed. They saw the Jews coming in. They began to make trouble for the Jews as early as 1920.
Wow.
Haj Amin al-Husseini and his dad
Right.
were very much involved in doing that. Any Muslim, any Arab who said, let's make peace with the Jews, let's live together, was assassinated or killed by their own people. That's another thing that they won't tell you, that Hamas was murdering their own Palestinians who were moderate and said, you know, we need to come to some arrangement. There's so much that goes on in this that just never comes through the media, and it paints a whole different picture once you see all of this.
Yeah. All right, so now this is again, you're making a great point of this, how much confusion is promoted by the media, and not just the media. When we say media, we mean people in the media who have an ulterior motive for what they're doing. That some of these people know what they're doing, some others don't. They've been drinking the Kool-Aid for so long, they just believe the lies and they don't really care about truth. We saw that with the politics of this last election. We saw how so much of the media lied to the people about Trump, and then all of a sudden they realize that this guy's not Hitler anymore. Now, once he wins, he's not Hitler anymore. Everybody's going to kiss his ring. But they lied so tenaciously about everything that he said. I mean,
that's what they're kissing. Okay, I thought it might be something else.
I mean, back then, if he burped, they would say he committed some kind of crime or he was up to some kind of nefarious thing. I mean, anything. And I actually did articles where I showed how he would make a statement, and then the media would take that statement out of context and create a whole new context for it, and serve that to the people, and they would believe it. So it's crazy. So now with this Israel thing, you have people who are very well known, very well respected in most areas. It was very well respected, like people like Candace, and we're going to talk about her now. Who at one time had a pretty good idea about what was going on, but then now when she became she jumped out of Christianity and went over to Catholicism, all of a sudden she started taking part in this type of evaluating Israel and Jews in a way that was unfair, in my opinion. Now, some things that she said were true, but again, she took some of those true things and she would make a true statement, and then she would overextend that true statement to something that was not sensible at all. And so you have this situation now where she's looks like she's anti-Semitic, even though she claims not to be. You know what I'm saying? And so Dennis Prager wrote her a letter. I thought he did a fantastic job because he point by point examined some of the things she was saying, and he was right. She used to use the phrase occupation, which was wrong. She used the phrase genocide, which it was not right. But she was getting that from somebody else, and she started even inviting those somebody else's, like Brianna Joy Gray, onto her program. She had this video. She did an interview with Finkelstein, that guy, the Jewish guy that seems to hate
Finkelstein, yeah.
Yeah, so she's been listening to these people, and she's getting confused as to the facts, and she's mixing everything up, and she thinks she's being brilliant about this. So we have to talk about this because I feel bad for her in one way, and another way, because she's so intelligent, I can't give her a pass because she's intelligent enough to be able to see what she's doing wrong. You talked about that she recently did a interview with a guy from the Liberty and talked about that whole atrocity, and there were things about that was left out. So let's first deal with that because you have some inside information on that. Let's deal with that, and she is a good example of how you can present a story, and when you don't give all the details, and you leave out impertinent details, you can convey a whole different, a whole wrong perspective on it.
Well, I was watching the interview that she did with the Liberty crewmen. Now, a lot of them have passed away now, the ones that had survived originally. And I interviewed two of them. I think it was about 15 or 20 years ago. I think this Philip gentleman that I can't remember his last name. After I got done, as I get older, I'm losing my ability to pull things up out of my hat. And I watched her do the interview. The whole issue of the USS Liberty being attacked by Israeli jets and almost sank it, as well as a torpedo boat. The issue is very complicated, and the crew are right. I mean, they were attacked by supposedly an ally on June 8th, 1967. And they're upset because the story has never really been deeply investigated. It was buried by both the United States and the Israeli government. I mean, they buried it pretty fast. But what I noticed that Candace didn't do during this interview, I waited for it all the way during it. I don't think she's a good interviewer, okay? Because I watched her and she didn't ask the hard questions. And I remember when maybe we should tell people what happened. You had this U.S. surveillance ship right off the coast of Sinai, very close to the coast, so close that the crewman admitted on the interview that I watched last night that they could actually hear the explosions of what was going on during the war in the Sinai Desert. And they were there. The Sixth Fleet had been given the orders to withdraw. As soon as war broke out, they were to withdraw from the coast. But the Liberty had picked up, I think it was 5 guys who were both linguists and probably CIA or NSA. And they were out there. What were they doing there? That was the one question that Candace did not answer. In other words, the Liberty was out there. Here they are in a war zone, right? Oh, we're just taking a cruise, we're sunning ourselves on the deck, minding our own business. And all of a sudden, here come the Israelis and they attack us. What were you doing there? What was the Liberty doing there? And when I asked the crewmen that, and I specifically asked them that, and I knew what the answer was going to be, they got very quiet and they refused to answer the question.
Wow.
And I can tell you my own supposition. First of all, I know they were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements after the incident, that they weren't going to talk about it. And number 2, it's classified. And so they couldn't. Well, if it's classified, that means there was something more going on than just the case of the Israelis, for no reason whatsoever, attacking the Liberty. Why would the Israelis do that? And you need to understand, our State Department, ever since day one, the formation of the State of Israel, has had an entire pro-Arabist, anti-Israeli section that have worked to undermine Israel. Wow. And so all of these factors, the Israelis were 20 years out from the Holocaust. This was the 3rd major war they'd gotten into to support their own existence, being threatened by all of the hostile countries around them. They have always viewed themselves as a struggle to exist. When they said never again after the Holocaust, the people running Israel at the time had lived in the Holocaust. Many were Holocaust survivors, etc. So these were the things that were the stakes. The Russians were involved in this. There were Russian surveillance, at least one Russian surveillance vessel out there in the Mediterranean as well. And so I read a bit about President Johnson's memoirs on this last night. I read Martin Gilbert's history of it when he wrote The History of Modern Israel. And he's a very good historian on the whole incident. It's far more complicated than just the way she presented, like, oh, here they were, and these nasty Israelis. And therefore, and this was the tenor of the interview, Israel isn't our best ally in the Middle East. That was 57 years ago. Okay. What if we had used the same attitude towards the British? Hey, you guys attacked us twice, once in 1776 and once in 1812. You guys aren't our best friends.
Right.
There are things that go wrong.
Yes.
And what disappointed me is she didn't do an investigative interview. No. She just wanted them to tell their story. Now, on behalf of the remaining crew, the surviving crew, they have the right to know what happened. Right. We have the right to know what happened, and we still don't know. We don't have the critical facts. We know what happened. We don't know why it happened. Right. And that's what's important. Amen. And that's what's bothering me about the way she's doing this. What she's engaging in is what I call ditchism. And I've watched this happen when Christians move from one part of the faith to another, so to speak. Okay, they jump out of one ditch, run all over to the other ditch on the other side of the road and jump into that ditch and begin defending that side, rather than remembering your job as a journalist is to go down the center of the road and find out what's happening. Amen. And now, if she becomes devout Catholic, that is going to change her viewpoint on that, despite Vatican II and despite Nostra Aetate. Okay, the document on the new relationship between the Catholic Church and the Jews. The new breed of conservative Catholics, with which we have much common cause, nevertheless view Vatican II as a big mistake. They want to go back to the bad old days of Vatican I, the Council of Trent, the Fourth Lateran Council. They believe Protestantism is terrible, blah, 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 ignoring the fact that all the freedoms that they are enjoying today in the West, that Catholics enjoy, is a direct result of the Protestant Reformation. If you want to see the problems on our southern border today. You were watching a play out of the conflict between the Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation to this day.
Yes.
That's why the Latin American countries wound up with a whole different series of government, religious, and worldview outlooks, why they've been impoverished for 500 years and keep ricocheting back and forth between crony dictatorships and Marxism. They just keep going like this. And it's very difficult for them to get it right and to go right down the center. The more that conservative Catholicism revives its head again, the more you will see anti-Semitism. Wow. Because it was the replacement theology of the Catholics, of the Orthodox, of the Lutherans, and of the Episcopalian, the Anglicans, who just all inherited the same idea that goes all the way back to Augustine in the 4th century, that the Jews rejected Jesus, and therefore all of the promises made to the Jews have now been transferred to the church. And when they say the church, they mean them, not the nasty old Protestants over here, especially evangelicals. We're always the odd guys out in this whole deal, which, by the way, is why evangelicalism has been spectacularly successful in Latin America, because it's providing a religious base. So yeah, that will play a role. And you know what replacement, well, I just told you what replacement theology is. The funny part is, this morning I grabbed the Bible here and I said, it's interesting how, remember, they were calling the Jews Christ killers. And you will find this even more stringently in Orthodox countries today, because they never went through the Reformation of the West. And so those attitudes are still there. The problem is that St. Paul, we'll use a Catholic expression, directly contradicts that viewpoint. In Romans 11, he says, I say then, God has not rejected his people, has he? May it never be. Never. Okay. And then he goes on and he tells you how you, the Gentile, meaning all those Catholics and Orthodox and everybody else who's not a Jew, are grafted into the Jewish people, that salvation comes through the Jews, that the fact that the Jews rejected him the first time, which it was prophesied in their scriptures he would do, opened the door to salvation for the Gentiles who had no right to it. Because of that. And that in the end, as it says, Israel shall be saved. And the promises that were made to Abraham were made in perpetuity. There was no condition based on those promises. There was no if then. And this comes over and over again. We see through the whole history of the Old Testament, God just whoops the heck out of the Jews when they're misbehaving. But then he turns around and deals with the countries that he used to whoop them.
That's right. Yes.
Because he promises, these are mine. You don't touch them. Okay. And that does not factor into Catholic, Lutheran, mainline Presbyterian, Anglican, Episcopalian, Orthodox theology. They are all into replacement theology. It was the anti-Semitism that generated from that allowed the Holocaust to happen in the first place, because the Christians did not stand up for the Jews. The Vatican reneged. I know I've had some people on that challenge whether or not Pius XII was not aggressive enough in supporting Jews. There were courageous priests and nuns that had supported Jews, but they did this on an individual basis. You talk about St. Colby, who's spent time in a concentration camp and died there, and the others. However, as a church, no, they didn't. Pius was noticeably quiet about the whole thing and should have spoken out more aggressively. It was the lack of biblical inerrancy that collapsed the Protestant church's response to that. And even Bonhoeffer's first objection to what the Nazis were doing was because they wanted the confessing church in Germany to discharge all of the pastors who were Jews that had become Christian pastors. There's a tremendous history here. When you begin to understand it, a whole new world emerges. You just won't get that in today's debate in the media.
Absolutely. That's why programs like yours and that Stone of Stumbling series is so great, because you cover so much in that. Let me ask you a question. If you had a chance to talk to Candace, what would you say to her?
Candace has jumped into something very late. She's jumped into it from a point of, I don't impute any bad meaning, willpower on her part. she's badly informed.
Right.
Just like Dennis Prager wrote her a letter saying,
Yes.
bing, 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 bing. You
Yeah.
know, if you're going to jump into this mess, you had better understand what you're jumping into. And she doesn't, not from a theological perspective, nor from a political perspective and historic perspective.
Yeah.
And I would start, first of all, interviewing her and say, okay, let's take you to town and see how much you really know about this. You have to, if you're going to be an investigative journalist, you need to investigate everything. I'll be the first person to say, have the Israelis been perfect? Absolutely not. Okay. You can, and they even mentioned the bombing of the King David Hotel.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Which was done. Who did the bombing of the King David Hotel? Well, that was the Irgun. The Irgun was the terrorist wing of the, we would say, the Israeli independence movement.
Right.
The Haganah was the formalized military wing of, and they were fighting with the Irgun to keep the Irgun under control, because the Haganah believed much more that you could do things by negotiation, by pushing through diplomatic channels, etc.
Right.
Now, that wasn't totally true, but the Irgun blew up the King David Hotel because it was the Brits who were opposing the immigration of Jews into Palestine.
Right.
This is just 4 years out from the Holocaust, remember? Okay, that they did that, etc., etc. So it wasn't all of the Israelis. It wasn't the Israeli government that did that. It was one wing of them, the Irgun. Of course, Menachem Begin, later Prime Minister of Israel, had to be a member of the Irgun. There was a point where the Haganah actually sank a ship in Haifa harbor that was bringing arms to the Irgun because they had to try to get them under control for what they were doing. Did the Israelis do bad things? Yep, there was the massacre of Deir Yassin. The Israelis looked the other way when the phalangists were murdering everybody in the refugee camps in Lebanon. There are a lot of things they did wrong.
Right.
But to say that the Palestinians are wholly innocent is absolutely untrue. You know, I've wanted to get a T-shirt made up, Free Palestine, and then put underneath that, kill Hamas and Hezbollah. Okay. Because, and the PLO, they are the chief obstacle to Palestine being free.
That's right.
They have no idea how to form a viable government.
Right.
No idea whatsoever. Right. So if they're going to be free and prosperous, you got to do it away from these guys. The people in the West have no idea of the corruption levels that exist within Hamas and Fatah and the PLO and the West Bank and what's going on in Hezbollah. Do they bring up the fact that of all the aid, you know, they were told Israel's preventing aid from coming into the poor Palestinians? Did they tell you that Hamas was siphoning off up to 50% of the supplies, selling them on the black market to raise more money to continue the war? They won't tell you that. Okay. So that's what I would do is I say, Candace, before you open your mouth, you darn well better know what you're talking about and the history of it. And here's a hint, you're not going to do this overnight. This is going to take you 6 months to get the knowledge you need to begin dealing with this issue. So she could be doing a lot of damage right now.
Right.
You know,
and it's going to be damage that she has to undo, and she's not going to be able to undo it, and it's going to be hard for her to save face.
It's going to be hard.
And her credibility.
Yes, this is going to pull the rug under her credibility, you know. But I told people in 2000, I said, as we cross the new millennium, I said, you're going to see some really wild crossovers. We are going to start having common cause with people that ordinarily we'd fight with.
Wow.
And you've seen that, you know, in terms of the different things. When Donald Trump was elected, I told my listeners, I said, okay, let me tell you what's going to happen here. Let me tell you what the media are going to do. How do I know this? Because I've worked with these guys for 55 years.
Please, yes, tell us.
I said, step number one will be the obituaries. There'll be 3 days of mourning. Okay. And that's what we saw. And if you notice, you know, how could this have happened? The polls told us that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Why do you suppose the people voted that way? Are these people really that ignorant that they would vote for somebody like Donald Trump? If you notice what they were doing, talking to each other. And I kept raising my hand, looking at the TV screen going, why don't you ask us? We'll tell you. Okay. And they did it again the next time, this next election. I said, then they will come up with stage 2 will be a filler gap. And I
Mm.
said, anything that Donald Trump does, whether he belches or
Yep.
sneezes
Yep.
or
Yep.
trips on this, they
Yep.
will write editorials just condemning it. That's
Yep.
exactly what happened. I said,
Yep.
and what they're looking for is something long term that they hope they can hang him with and
Yep.
sink him with.
Yes.
And that they thought they found in Russia collusion. When
Mm-hmm.
that didn't work, then they turned to
Lawfare.
presidential impeachment.
Yep.
Look at the absurdity
Mm.
of the
Mm.
second impeachment of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of an impeachment? An
Yeah.
impeachment, by the way, is an indictment. It
That's
is
right.
not a conviction.
That's right.
And the purpose of an impeachment is the removal of the president from office due to real malfeasance on the part of the
Right.
president.
Right.
Within 6 days, he was leaving office anyway, and they went ahead and impeached him again. This makes no sense whatsoever, except to try to make Donald Trump look bad.
Yeah,
Remember,
that's right.
Donald Trump was a darling of the left
That's right.
until he went over to the dark side.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So none of this makes any sense, but you can watch MSLSD every night and you won't hear any of
You
this.
won't hear it. That's right.
And
Absolutely.
by the way, Rachel Maddow, she's had her salary cut back from what is it, $30 million to $26 million a
Still
year.
too much.
That's going to really cut into her monthly clothing allowance. I just
She
feel
less. I was shocked she got paid that much money, but it tells you how much money they're willing to pay to make people for people who are willing to lie to the public.
I talk to family members who watch these things. I say they're lying to you. They're lying to you. Even gotten stung. You were listening to them during the financial collapse back in 2007, which on our show, if you remember, we started talking about this collapse as early as 2004.
Yep.
We said this is coming. You need to get your investments out of the market.
Yep.
The year it happened, we said I was co-hosting a financial show too, if you remember at the time. And we said, you need to get your money out, get into a cash position, because this year, the whole fraud of the subprime mortgage fiasco is going to become obvious.
Yes.
And it's going to collapse.
Yep.
And it's going to ricochet right down into the credit markets and it'll cause it. And that's precisely what happened. It was there to be seen.
Yeah.
Did the media tell you that? No. Not a word. What did Congressman Barney Frank say? Oh, no, there's no problem with Fannie and Freddie. Everything's just fine. I mean, he used to talk like Buddy Hackett. Remember that? And everything else. And I'm shaking my head. And to her credit, Brooks Lee Bourne, she was a Democrat. She was warning that we were so overextended in derivatives, and they all began attacking her. Yes. And she was correct. And we were correct. And even though these people got burned, they're back at it again, you know?
Yeah, I think it's sad that now I think first of all, I'm grateful that Trump has won, and he won it was not no slight win. I mean, throughout all the elections, they kept saying they were neck and neck. They were never neck and neck. And the people who were donating to them, they found out that they were being lied to while they were being asked for money. So
that was another lie.
That's all coming out now. But now I notice when I'm listening to the media when they're discussing this whole thing, they're not talking about. They still are not talking about the deviousness of the Democrats and how what they did with Trump after 2016 when he won, the way that they weaponized everything in the media against him. They're going to do that same thing now. I think that what no one's talking about now is that how Biden's opening up the border and letting just about all of these people in here, I mean, millions of people that we don't know who they are. Whatever problems comes as a result of that, they're going to try to blame Trump for that. They're not going to want to apply that to Biden. And then when they're the one that lets these people in here. But we have no way of knowing who's in this country right now. And many of them come from enemy nations.
This is true. And what he's trying to do is do as much damage as he can. Right now, he was proposing a new, let's get Syria back on its feet and have this free country and whatever. And if you look at the pronouncements of al-Jolani in the past, memory has uncovered earlier videos of him saying, first we take Damascus, then we take Jerusalem, death to the whatever, that type of thing. And I'm thinking, there are three groups, minority groups in Syria that count right now.
Right.
First of all, the Kurds, they're in the northeast section of the country. They're also in Turkey and also in northern Iraq. They virtually control northern Iraq right now. The second group are the Druze, and there are many Druze who are Israeli citizens, and they favor Israel, okay? And then the Christians, the Christian minority, which was, prior to the Civil War, I think about 2.1 million, somewhere around there. They're down to 500,000 now that got out. Their fate is important. if they were really smart, rather than trying to keep Syria glued together, the Kurds have wanted their own state. The Turks just hate the Kurds, absolutely hate them, just like they did the Armenian genocide a century ago, even though they deny it. They killed all these Armenian Christians. And why don't you give the Kurds their own country, let the Druze have their territory, let the Sunnis have their territory. Don't try to smash this crowd together again. But here we come, the Western global crowd, you know, their ideas, and they're going to muck it up again. I can see it coming.
You know,
and we don't know. Good. We don't know where Al-Jilani's going, because he's starting to sound like another Arafat, where Arafat, what we did is Arafat was a terrorist. Let's just understand that's what he was. And when it came to the peace process, we stood him up, dusted him off, put a suit and tie. Well, actually, we put a keffiyeh on him and
lipstick on a pig.
Right. And lipstick on a pig, and said, he's a freedom fighter and he's reformed now and he's in favor of peace. No, he never was, you know. And so you have to understand the religious component of Islam and its dedication to Jerusalem, to overturning the Nakba, the tragedy, the disaster that occurred when the Israelis took it over, and they view it. The idea that when territory is held by Islam, it can never be relinquished by Islam. That they even talk about parts of Spain today is still belonging to Islam. Even though the Jews threw all the last remnants of the Moors went out in 1492, you know, and they do this. And so that's one of the things we did do with the eschatological expectations of the Muslims regarding Jerusalem. And I said, you see why this is just totally incompatible. And it doesn't make any difference what these political powers come in and do. And the Bible told us in the end times, Jerusalem would be that stone of stumbling, the rock of offense, anybody who tries to pick this thing up. And of course, it refers to Jesus as well as to Jerusalem. But anybody who tries to pick this thing up and deal with it will hurt themselves grievously. You know? So it's much more complicated than the way the woke, I call it the wokest pocus crowd, trying to impose their ideology. Remember, David Horowitz said this really correctly. The issue is never the issue. The issue is the outcome of the revolution. The revolution is to completely transform Western culture into some kind of socialist utopia. That's it. The globalist crowd are an extension of that. They want to transform the world into some kind of global socialist left-wing utopia. Even as we watch it right now, progressive ideas from environmentalism to the Middle East are collapsing as we watch them as far as their viability. And they keep trying to prop them up. So whenever the peace and justice crowd shows up on your doorstep, you know that war is just ahead. Because these people, like President Biden, enable the war to happen. The President Trump in his first term had the Iranians push back against the wall. And a little longer than that, the people of Iran would have overthrown the mullahs, and that would have been the end of the Iranian regime per se. Biden came in and said, oh, did that poor orange-haired guy come and make life? Let me see if we can make this better for you.
Here's some money to make you feel better.
Here's some money to make you feel better, which turned right around into buying weapons and support for Hamas and for Hezbollah and everything else. It's insane. Amazing. what we have done. But again, you won't hear that on the media, you know. So
John, let me ask you, man, what are you doing? Since you've been concluded your Steel on Steel program, what are you doing now to keep yourself busy and maintain?
We've been very active with the persecuted church in Pakistan. And I do a once a month update at our services on what's going on in persecution worldwide. As I said, we had a Facebook page until they threw us off because they didn't like what I was saying about Nigeria. And even though we appealed it, they threw us off again. So I want them to send me a certificate saying, you know, because I want to frame it. And say, you know, we the bigots and fascists at Facebook, or what's it called now? X, or I can't remember. They keep changing the names.
Oh, the Facebook, X, I don't know what Facebook is.
Yeah. They keep changing the names to protect the guilty.
The guilty, yeah.
And as if that's more of that pig lipstick.
Yep.
And so we work directly with that. We do take contributions because we've put a church up in Lahore. We've got the property now. We're legally a church. It's affiliated with Candlelight Christian Fellowship.
Right.
But when things go in, like this man who was murdered by these upset Muslims because he challenged the fact that they were mistreating Christians in Lahore, and they came in, killed him in front of his wife and kids in the middle of the night.
Wow.
We're supporting his family's kids' education every month. When they had the riots in Pakistan, our people there went in and tried to help the families to start recovering, because you remember they were, what was it, 3,000 homes were destroyed and 50 churches are better and 14 people dead as a result of that. It was bad enough that the Catholic bishop of, I think he's a cardinal of Pakistan, went to the Pakistani government and said, okay, that's enough. He said, we have never attacked a single mosque in this country. We do not deserve this. And if you don't get this under control, we will make trouble for you, meaning the Catholic Church will make trouble for the Pakistani government worldwide. And Pakistan needs US dollars. Pakistan needs US thing. And so they're very, very careful about that. And that's when Pakistan sent in the troops to stop all the ding-dong rioting. But people in the West do not understand Islam. I love Muslim people. I want to see it work for them. But you have to understand the facets of jihad.
That's right.
And I've pointed out to people, okay, say you take all the million Muslims that there are in the world and say only 10% of them are jihadis. Take 10% of a lot of people. You still got quite a few jihadis.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a problem. This is realpolitik. The people coming across our border, this is realpolitik. This is what's real.
Yes.
The only reason it's been easier is that Hispanic culture is also Christian Western culture. So we haven't had as many issues as they've had in Europe. I will also say our American immigration system is broken. We've been working directly with them to bring people into the country legally that have needed it. The system is broken. It's slow. It's sclerotic. It costs thousands and thousands of dollars to do it, which people from poor countries don't have. And my whole family, we're all immigrants. My birth father came from Italy. Okay. My grandfather that lived with us until he passed away came from Germany. You know, my mother's family I was adopted. I was part of a result of an affair between a restaurant owner and his waitress. And so I was adopted by another couple who were my parents effectively, because I never knew my birth parents. But they were from Ireland, you know. So I said, wow, I've got a great heritage, German, Irish, Italian.
All American.
all American. Yeah, that's what we And it's the same deal when we deal with racial issues.
Yes.
Civil Rights Act of 1964, Dancel.
Yes.
Here we are, how many years out from that? Why are we still talking about this? What went wrong? And I'll tell you what went wrong. What went wrong is Martin Luther King's civil rights movement, which was a justifiable thing to try to override 100 years of segregation and Jim Crow laws, everything that shouldn't have been. All right. That was hijacked by other people, by the cultural Marxists. They came in, they said, oh, we can use this.
This is great. This is great. Yeah.
You know, and this is great. We can go pound on this, you know. And so that's why I asked the question, why is that? What is wrong? And you have to, again, I'm committed to truth. What went wrong? Let's find it out. Let's fix it. I point the finger at African-American pastors. You're not telling your congregations the truth. You're afraid. Okay. Let's tell them the truth about why this thing went off the rails and why you're not there. Why is it that I would point out Asians came into the country about the same time as the Civil Rights Act? They didn't even speak the language. This was people, remember, that were let in because of the Vietnam War and others. They became, whether they're South Korean or Vietnamese or Cambodian or Chinese, they set up shop. They did very well. They're doing spectacularly well at American universities. Why is it that the African-American community has not done it? Same problem. They faced racism. They faced the same obstacles, but not here. They're telling us that racism is our unpardonable sin and it's unique to the United States. Well, I beg to differ. Slavery and racism has existed throughout the history of mankind. We decided we were going to take a stand against it. And through a lot of blood and sweat and tears and a couple of 100 years, we abolished slavery.
Earlier than many other countries.
Yes. Slavery, do you know slavery exists today?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
There is sex slavery going on.
Yep.
There are still Muslim groups, Arab groups that are kidnapping generally Black Africans
Yep.
to act as slaves. It's going on today.
Today.
And I remember saying that one day when we had one of these in my part of the country. You know, we're supposed to be a white-topia, and these radical leftist groups come in, they spend a couple of days, and then they go home and write articles about us, etc. And I go, this is just total misrepresentation.
Yeah.
But I said that, look, slavery is over 170 years old. It's gone. All right, hasn't been back. Yep, we did have Jim Crow. We had the segregation laws. The Civil War lasted from 1860 to 1964.
Right.
The fighting quit in 65, but it went on by other means.
That's right.
Why? Because the man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
That's
and
right.
The Southerners viewed it as a war of northern aggression, and they didn't give up on that for 100 years. Okay. All right. But the point was, in Great Britain, in the British Empire, in the United States, in Canada, well, Canada never had it. We abolished it in the West. Right. That's where the idea of rights comes. That's a plus, not a minus. You can't take where we are today, take your ideals today, read it back to people 200, 300, 400, 500 years and say, you should have known that.
Right.
Okay. We stand today because of the work that those people did. And I remember Jason, who is the Jamaican immigrant? Like I said, my memory's slipping a little more. I'll think of it in a second. At DePaul University. Now he's Jamaican, Black, gay, but his problem is he's conservative.
Oh boy, big mistake.
Big mistake. And so although on the intersectionality scale, he should be over here like, hooray, he goes down. And they have been trying to deplatform him for I don't know how long, to boycott his classes, this and that. And I remember when we were talking, dang, I can't remember his last name. It's bugging the heck out of me because we've talked several times. And he said, well, we're going to talk about, some of these conservative economists who built the idea. You can talk about Frederick Bastiat and the law and the others who established ideas of economics. And the students in his class would say, well, we don't want to talk about them because they're dead white racists. This is what they've been brought up on, this nonsense. And he said, I want to really tell them, and he's very kind and he works with them very carefully. You need to understand, you would not even have the language to talk about racism, segregation, justice, rights, if it were not for the work of the so-called dead white racists in philosophy, in economics, etc. You can't just take these stupid ideas of today and impose them back on history. And he said the tragedy of what he sees of many students coming in is, he said, they're ignorant and arrogant. They don't know, but they're arrogant about what they think they do know. And he said it's a dangerous combination. Fortunately, there's a whole new wave of people homeschooling, private schools, private colleges. They've said enough of that. We're going to teach what actually should be taught. And as the progressive ideas that have prevailed in the West are collapsing around us and will continue to collapse, they will provide the new seed ground of, I think, a new generation of people who understand why it's worthwhile.
Amen.
And it's the same deal. By the way, do you know the Arabs in Israel, the ones who are Israeli citizens, they were asked, well, when we get this peace treaty signed with the Palestinians.
Yes, please tell that.
Okay. Do you guys want to go and live under their control? Over 88% said, absolutely no way, Jose. Why? Because they're doing very well in Israel. The gay community here was supporting the Palestinians, gays for Palestine or whatever. Really? Do you want to do that? No. Israel's the only state in the Middle East where LGBT are safe. And that's why Palestinian LGBT come into Israel to be safe. And you guys are nuts. You're mixed up. Crazy. Okay. So I always have to laugh. That's sort of like saying, chickens for Kentucky Fried or something like that. It makes no sense whatsoever. And they show, by the way, how their values, postmodern values, are fungible. They're relative. There are four characteristics. They're relative. And because of that, they're constantly changing. And because of that, one idea will collide with the other idea. They're self-contradicting. Bang, boom, clash. And that's why they have intersectionality. Intersectionality is a way to try to harmonize all of the illogical production that this
That's the
postmodern
damage
idea
control.
creates.
That's
Yeah, it's damage
control.
control,
Yes.
right? And the only thing that holds it together is group consensus.
Yes.
And that's why, and you brought this up an hour ago on the show, when you talk about this, Denzel, you and I can disagree about a point. We can argue.
Right.
We can still be friends.
Right.
We can still have dinner together and agree on a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
For them, the whole structure is held together by spit and tinfoil.
That's right.
Okay. And if you destroy with facts, just one part of it, the whole house of cards comes down just like that.
Great point.
And that's why when you win, and you talk about Candace Owens, you could go to and talk to. I'm not so sure you could do that with Rachel Maddow.
No.
Because you get three reactions when you talk to a postmodern leftist.
Yeah.
You get three reactions. One is what I call the deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
Okay. It's sort of like this. They know they've been had, but they have no idea how to assimilate it.
Yeah.
The second one is either they commune with the spirits. It's like this. You can tell the moment you've hit that in the conversation, they've checked out, or they run away going, no, 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 with their fingers stuck in their ears. And the last one, it's actually probably four traits. The last one is they become violently angry at you and begin sputtering. They go into a 3-minute rant. And I've seen this. You can actually just start your stopwatch and just sit there and listen to it, in which they will contradict themselves 3 or 4 times within the course of 3 minutes. So if you were to tell Candace one thing, Candace, I want you to have somebody on, whatever the issue is about the Middle East. I want you to have this guy who says this side. I want to have the other guy from the other side, and you will moderate. You will not get involved in the debate like our so-called moderators in our so-called presidential debates, who don't know that the referees aren't supposed to play on the football team. Okay. And you will moderate, and we're going to see who comes out on top with facts. And I tell you, I know where it's going to be, but that's why Rachel Maddow won't do that.
She wouldn't do that. No.
Or when Reed. Or one that whenever they, I was going to say The View. Whenever the ladies on The View come on, even if they have a conservative representative, a woman or man, it's a 4-on-1 gang up. And you can't get a single thought worked through to its conclusion because 3 of the other mouths are going, and everything else, like mouthing all sorts of verbal garbage. And I said, I'd only go on that show if we did a one-on-one, and you have to keep them under control while you're doing it.
I would have to control the microphone. I would have to have control of the microphone.
You would have to have control of that. Unlike, by the way, where they actually cut off the microphones of the presidential. You can't believe what you're seeing.
Unbelievable.
Okay. And I go, I can't believe these people are pure fascists and they don't even know it. They think they're fighting against fascism and they're doing every single thing that fascists and socialists, communists used to do. Cut off microphones, stage debates, put out fake information. They're doing it all and telling us we're saving democracy. Oh, really? Okay. Well, let's see. Maybe we could do with less saving. So.
All right, now tell us how we can support you guys. You said you have some things going on. We want to where can we go to donate?
Well, if people want to support our Asia missions, is what we call it, you can go to candlelight.org and make a donation. Make sure you specify in the purpose line Asia mission so it doesn't go into the church's general fund. It goes into the fund for what we're doing. We have a Pakistani pastor and his wife living with us right now and their family. And he is establishing a network of Pakistani pastors in exile that can act to help them there. We're building a church in Lahore to pull people together. We try to help people. We're bailing out, in a number of cases, we've had Pakistani families hiding in Thailand illegally. And when they get legal admission to the United States or to Canada, we have to pay their exit fees because the Thai government will let them out of the country, but only if they pay their fines for overstaying. And that runs, say, for a family of 5, about $2,000 US. So that's the type of stuff that we're doing. So candlelight.org, it's a church, and they have sponsored our Asia Missions program. And they can pray for us. We do a I do a monthly update on the KYMS radio stations at todayschristiancountry.com. Last Friday of every month.
Okay.
I do an update on geopolitics and what the church is up to. And then I'm stupid enough to come on programs like this. And,
Well, man, you've been a blessing. I have to tell you, always look forward to speaking with you. And I'm hoping that right now, legacy media is deteriorating. And social media now is becoming the source where you go out to get news at.
but you pointed out, and this is
Mhm.
really true,
Mhm.
what am I trying to say? The alternative sources are in danger of breaking up in terms of being a reliable source. It's
Right.
getting really dicey. I'm seeing the
Yes.
alternative media put out some real garbage too.
Yes, they
And
are.
I've
That's
warned
right.
people, you
Yes,
can't just listen. You have to get the facts and then evaluate it,
that's right.
you know.
Well, you're making my point. That's why people like you are so important. I'm hoping that you'll get us some inspiration to do maybe a half an hour news program where you just go on and just tell the news. Give the news from a clear perspective, because we definitely need somebody else to look at beside a lot of crazy stuff that's out here. But I encourage you. You know, you're here for a reason, and your voice is necessary to be heard. I just look forward to hearing you, whatever you're doing. I'm going to be going over that Stone of Stumbling series again. And please keep us posted. Anything you do, any new appearances you have, let us know so we can help promote it for you. Okay?
It would be good, and periodically we could do an update. I do that for certain podcasts and radio shows. I just say, okay, what's happened over the last 2 months? And then
Yes.
we summarize it.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not, it's
great.
no good just to chase the news every single day.
No,
That's
right.
worthless.
That's
But
right. I
after a
agree.
while you get a picture and say, well, here's the picture,
Yes.
of what's going on. So,
Well, I look forward to you doing something like that, because you're definitely the man. I appreciate you, Ryder. And your wife, I appreciate her too, because I know that when she having that kind of support behind you makes your job a lot easier.
it does, yeah. And coming the fact that she has a broadcast background, news background
Yes.
too, we
Amen.
talk the same language and we think the same way,
Amen.
So we're able to work together on projects. I tell people, my wife and I, we've been married for 45 years.
Hmm.
We've been doing productions together for 45 years, and 3 of those productions are grown.
Wow.
So, although they're still around, we've never had an empty nest per se. We
Amen.
always have,
Amen.
it's like a revolving door of people through here, and a bunch of kids that weren't our own that we were wound up raising too. So,
Amen. Let me
yeah,
ask you before I let you go.
yeah.
A lot of your program that you've done, a lot of the programs you've done, are you guys planning on putting any of those things together, like packaged? Because some of them are timeless. I know some of it is dated, but there's some of the stuff you've done are timeless and could be very beneficial, because a lot of it's still relevant today, even in our day and time. And I think that might help to also finance your ministry, to put some of those things together and make them available to people. Because I mean, I know we can go online and get them someplace, but
Let me tell you what happened. After 33 years, I think God just said, pull the plug.
okay.
I was one of the first voices out there. Rush went on the air in 87. I went on the air in 90. And
Wow.
ironically, the same guy that hired him at KFBK in Sacramento hired me at KCBS in San Francisco, Norm Woodruff.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Norm taught me, Norm and Jim Simon, the father of talk radio, he was called,
Hmm.
at CBS and other places, taught me most of what I know about news and news work, and it was worth it. So I was one of the early voices. I was one of the voices where they were always call me extreme. Even people in my own church, why are you so extreme? I said, I'm not extreme. I'm giving you the facts. Well, surely Dan Rather would tell us about that on the CBS. Well, they believed back then that the media were telling them the truth.
Yeah.
And so here's good old stupid John out here every day saying, well, here's what they're saying, but here's what's really going on if you investigate it,
Yeah. Well,
So God pulled the plug. As soon as he plugs me back in, I will. I needed a sabbatical.
oh yes, I agree. I
It
know
wears
that.
on your soul, Dancel.
Yeah, I
It
hear you.
wears on your
Yeah.
soul every
True.
day. I would wind up screaming at the computer when I'm reading what I know is an abject lie. Okay. Just screaming. And not so much because I expect politicians to lie.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I
Right.
got that. But I
Right.
don't expect the media to lie. That's my
Right.
profession.
Right.
And I'm
Amen.
disgusted by them,
Amen. Amen.
So anyway,
Well, I
pray for the
thank God for you.
persecuted church.
Yes, I thank God for you, and we'll definitely be keeping you in prayer. And for anything you guys are doing, we're going to be praying that God will have His way in your life and use you to the fullest extent while you're with us. We praise God for you and
Yep.
love you, and I'm looking forward to some more work from you.
That's good. God
Amen.
bless.
Have a blessed day. Amen. Look forward to seeing you again. Okay.
Shalom.
All right. God bless.
I was told long ago, I believe what I was told. I was told Jesus is coming soon. I was just a child when I was told, just a lad, but now I am grown, and I still believe he's coming.